Welcome to the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast, brought to you by ProudMouth. I'm your host, Matt Halloran. Being your own loud is not new to marketing, but the mindset, strategies, and resources to help you get there are evolving faster than this industry is keeping up. It is time to find a new perspective on what works why and how to move your business forward. Listen as I interview guests to help you learn from them how to be your own loud. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to another Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. Kirk and I are going to talk about something. I'm going to set this up just very quickly. So I got back recently. The National Podcast Movement, which is the largest North American podcasting convention, was in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was sitting there and I took in as much as I possibly can. And I got back and I told Kirk and I told the team that they're doing stuff all wrong. They're looking at things so incorrectly. And I felt like I was in bizarro world. And there's a couple of different things. And we're going to talk about two specific things today: monetization and podcast quality. So Kirk, I'm going to ask you some questions about monetization because you've got some good stats and numbers. And then I want you to ask me a couple of questions about the quality component that was missing there. So you ready? So I want you to talk about monetization. Where do we begin? Give us some numbers to put things into perspective, because as I set this up, here it is, everybody. At the convention, if you don't have 10,000 downloads to your podcast a month, nobody will give you money.
10,000. So I'm going to talk about some numbers, and then we're going to talk about listening to anybody who's talking about podcasting monetization, because they're talking about the wrong end of monetization. Like it should be completely flipped on its head. So let's give you some numbers to show you how basically useless it is to pursue how most podcast people talk about monetizing your podcast. Then we're going to dump that on its head, but we're going to have some fun with this in the first place. So this is based on June 2021 data. And it's the number of downloads that you need per episode within the first 7 days of its release. Okay. So you launch a new episode for 7 days. If you want to be in the top 1% of all podcasts, you only have to hit 3,647 downloads to get in the top 1%. The top 1%. So what Matt just told you is you need 10,000 a month. So if you're doing 2 episodes, you might hit 10,000, but probably not.
Right.
So you'd have to hit 4 episodes at least 2,500. So the top 1.5% of all podcasts to hit the ground level for advertising. If you get 10,000 podcasters, it's more than likely that 9,999 of them are never going to get advertising. So why is everybody talking about, why do you go to a conference like this and listen to everybody talk about podcast monetization? It's like this dream. It's almost like the Hollywood.
It is.
It's like Californication. I'm quoting Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Wow. That was wrong on a couple of different levels. I mean, contextually correct.
No,
it's like Disneyland, right? And nobody has the Rapid Pass. Break this down even more. So okay.
That sounds about right. You're talking Disney World and I'm talking Red Hot Chili Peppers. To hit the top 5% of all podcasts in the first 7 days is 629. Honestly, a measly 629 to be in the top 5%. A lot of our clients, we started sending out these benchmarks, and they're so excited about the realities that their podcasts are doing a lot better than they thought from a download perspective. They feel good about other things, but sometimes it's not easy to get downloads. But the most important thing is who is actually listening to your podcast. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that a good podcast company or a good podcast will do is it'll have the right people listening. And you get enough of the right people listening, the world's your oyster. Yeah. And that's the way it is. And we're going to talk about that, what the oyster is, a little bit later here. So to get in the top 10%, you only have to have 264 unique downloads. Top 10%. We consistently hit well over 264. So we're in the 5 to 10. That's our Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. Our new podcast, Be Your Own Loud, is not there yet. Probably more in the top 20, top 15%, but it'll hit it. And we have great guests there and great topics. So that'll be wonderful. To hit the top 25% of all podcasts, you need 78. And to hit the top 50%, you need 28, which is exciting. Or not at all. depending on how you look at it.
28's not a very exciting number to a lot of people, but
yeah. So if you've got 27 listens per episode, you're about average in the first week. That seems like a really low bar.
It does.
But oddly enough, somewhere between 70 and 90%, depending on which year, which company you grab their stats from. So 70 and 90% of all podcasts never make it past 10 episodes. So the numbers are even more, staggering to figure out, who's getting here. Anyway, so those are some pretty neat stats. Nobody's going to monetize a podcast, although that seems to be pie in the sky, what all the podcasting industry is talking about. And it's not what we talk about ever. It just seems, it's maddening. To even think that we're going there. And these people, in our opinion, they all have it wrong. If you want to monetize a podcast, stop thinking about monetizing the podcast, start talking about monetizing your business. If you sell a product or a service, that is the golden bucket. Come on, help me out. I
think it's goose on that one, dude. Yeah, your analogy, you're off with the analogy today, but I think that would be the golden goose. That would be where, you'd want to be.
I need a tweak. I don't know what that means.
I'm going to get you a list of approved analogies. That's what
I couldn't even think of goose today.
I know, dude. That's brutal. Now, hold on here. Let's switch gears though. So golden goose, good.
I did just spend 2 days in a hotel, 2.5 days in a hotel room with my 8-year-old and my grumpy 16-year-old who was away trying out for hockey teams in other cities.
Ooh.
And
that could have messed your brain up right there, dude.
No
so how do you monetize? Let's switch gears here. And then you need to ask me some questions about the other thing that was missing, which is quality. But talk about that. Talk about how do you monetize your products and services by using a podcast?
Well, we got 3 different ways. Mm-hmm. The first one is to keep your clients happy, your existing customers, anybody who's in your network. People, you had a great example of other ways to do this. You've talked about this before. You're talking about the newsletter.
People used to pay my old company $295 for a weekly market commentary, and that was for client communication. Could you imagine that being the only piece of communication that you have? It's a one-way street. You're talking at people. And on top of that, how many people, we know how many people opened it, which was 1% to 3%, right? That was a cornerstone of the client communication system at the old company that I worked at, was the weekly market commentary.
So just imagine you're actually talking about more interesting things that aren't mass produced, because those commentaries are almost always mass produced by a couple of companies. And one of them is a friend. One of those companies is a friend of ours. Mm-hmm. And I believe they're going to be starting a podcast soon with us, which is amazing. Those things still need to happen, but there are a lot of other things that you can share with your existing audience and customers that are going to keep them interested in you, right? Yep. That's monetizing a podcast. Keeping business around sometimes is easier than getting new business. So pay attention to that. So that's your first way to monetize a podcast, or to use a podcast to monetize your business. We're just going to pretend every time we say monetize a podcast that's what that means.
Sure.
The second way is to get introductions to centers of influence. A client of ours and a colleague of ours, Derek, sent me a LinkedIn message last week and said, you got to listen to Gary Vee's podcast. Go to this time and listen to what he's talking about, because it perfectly complements what you guys are doing there, why you have a podcast, and why Derek started a podcast recently, and why he's absolutely loving it. What he talked about was, when you have a podcast, it makes networking, building relationships, and getting people's attention it changes the game completely. So if you want to reach out and say hi to somebody, or ask for a referral, or get somebody to come, be a guest lecturer or a guest columnist, or in this case, a guest podcaster, to come and talk about what they know, so you can add value to your audience. And then you can leverage their profile potentially, or be able to connect with their audience. When you have a podcast, it's way easier. Hey, Matt, I know that you have a wonderful business. You get a lot of expertise, and you're a thought leader. I would love to have you come on my podcast. I'd love to pick your brain about some of your successes and some of the stories and things that you've learned and the people you've helped. do you have 30 minutes, in the next month or so to come and hang out with me and just shoot the breeze? How easy is that for Matt to say yes to?
Well, we find it's very easy, right?
Absolutely. What do you have to do that now? That's one of the things. What are you doing? What's your platform? Hey, let's go for a coffee. Okay, it's one-on-one. No leverage there.
Nope.
Oh, do you want to write a column, an article for my blog? A lot of work. What is it? Podcast is amazing. That's another amazing way to think about doing this. And the third way is to attract a whole bunch of new ideal people to listen to your podcast. There's some really neat things that we are talking about. We're on the cusp of doing. In some ways, we're already doing it. Is we're using social media for our customers and for ourselves, not to get people to do business with us, but to get people to listen to our thought leadership, to listen to our podcast. Most of our energy goes to get you to listen and pay attention right here. I don't know how you got here today or tonight or this morning, whenever you're listening. No matter what you're doing, whether you're walking the dog, cooking dinner, taking the train, driving in your car, I don't know what you're doing, but thank you so much for being here. And the truth is that we work to get you here, because when you're here, you can listen to how much we know, how much we care, who we know. Man, we bring on our competition, who you would think are competition all the time. Yeah. We're trying to make your world better. And if you listen to somebody named Bob, who we brought on the show, who might do something similar to us, but Bob really connected with you, beautiful. We want you to be better and have more success in your business and life. And we're going to bring on everybody who can. We've had 250 guests.
Oh, yeah.
They're not all as prepared, and they're not all add as much value and they're not all relevant to your world, but we do our best to make them as relevant as possible. We get rewarded by that because we've got a lot of people that want to come back and work with us, be partners, centers of influence. We have people say, hey, I want to start a podcast. You guys are the one I would work with. Tell me, how do we get started? What does the process look like? We had a podcast 294 where we talked about, is selling even needed anymore? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about. Using this to attract your ideal audience, have people engage, have fun while you're talking about your business and your expertise. That's the third way to monetize your podcast, and it's off the charts. And the reason that we're so passionate about telling this, and might even sound a little bit irked when we started this episode, is because we don't want to ever be in a position to have to sell what we do, and we don't think you need to have to do that either. And it's not what the industry says. And here's probably the greatest reason why. And we're going to do an episode on this down the road. And that is that when we started figuring out what we can measure in marketing, it ruined marketing to a degree, because people started focusing on the stuff that they could measure, but nobody was talking enough about the stuff that they couldn't measure, which might have been 90% of the most important part. And then we're talking about the 10%, which we could actually measure. Like, it's actually the thing. In a lot of cases, it's not the thing. It's one of many things. It just happens to be the only thing that people can measure. And podcasting is really interesting from that perspective, Matt, because there's not a lot you can measure in podcasting, not like everybody wants to. And the anonymity of it is one of the most powerful things.
Yeah.
I'm on like a 7-minute rant here.
It's way less than 7. I would have cut you off if you were at 7 minutes, dude.
Okay,
but
good.
You're absolutely right. I think that people are quite misguided. I think people have unrealistic expectations on what success really means. I don't think that they understand that by utilizing a system to help grow your podcast, that things change. Now, Kirk, I do want to switch gears here, because there are two major things that really pissed me off at this conference. And the first one was the monetization track. Do you remember the second thing that I came back with that was just so floored pissed off about, that I couldn't believe didn't exist there?
Oh, yeah. Coaching.
Yeah.
Who is helping people be good podcasters?
Nobody, dude. I just like, all of these people are in these breakouts learning how to be better interviewers, by the way. And they were, most of those things were terrible. Monetization, equipment, syndication, all of this stuff, but nobody was trying to help people get better behind the microphone. Isn't that one of the biggest drivers of engaging content and getting more clicks and listens and engagement? If you suck and nobody's telling you suck, it's like American Idol. Do you remember? I don't know. Is that a show even on anymore? You remember when the people used to go on and they couldn't sing and they're like, Simon Cowell, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm the greatest singer in the world, right? Well, the problem is that was the first person ever told that person they sucked. I'm not telling you that we tell everybody that you suck, but you all know that you can get better with practice, being prepared, and being organized with your show. And when I was at the conference, dude, there was nobody talking about this at all.
We should be recording video of this sometimes, because I can't describe your face when you were channeling your inner Simon Cowell there.
Yeah.
It didn't look like him, because
It really didn't. He's quite handsome.
His voice gets lower. He doesn't get, but it was really entertaining. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad that's just between you and I. I don't know if I want everybody to see that.
Yeah, no. Well, actually, we do have a Zoom video feed.
I'm going to burn it.
We are recording.
I'm burning the video. No, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. This ain't seeing the light of day. That was the other big thing. So the monetization. Who's
going to help you be good at your craft? I can't imagine if I just out of the blue started trying to do my own podcast. Oh boy.
Kirk, we did that. What are you talking about?
No,
how many episodes did we dump?
You've been coaching me for years at this.
We first started, we both weren't very good, right? And look at how much more comfortable you are behind the microphone, and how much more organized you are, how much more prepared you are, all of those things.
We're not prepared at all today.
Well, today is a different story. Well, we are doing that, but everybody else knows that normally we have a mind map, right? We can do this extemporaneously, because the last time we tried to do something extemporaneously early on, our team was like, we're not releasing that podcast because it wasn't very good.
No, but that only happened a couple times.
It was enough for me, dude. That's all I have to say. It was enough for me.
Out of the 320, 25, wherever, I don't even know where we're at. Yeah, there haven't been many like that, because we're going to scare everybody off. But I'm telling you, having somebody who knows what they're doing, and then eventually you become that person. You become that mentor. Dude. You pass it along, right? You be the person who says, hey, Sue, why don't you have your own podcast? You're so amazing. You know so many people, and you're delightful to listen to, and you care so much about your clients and what you do. You should have a podcast. So if you know anybody like that, ask them why they don't have a podcast. We're more than happy to help them out. We need more listeners of our podcast. We always want to have more people listening to us. Hopefully, we can make a difference in the world. What else we got here? We got
nothing. We got nothing.
Different ways to monetize.
Yeah. Well,
we got different ways to monetize.
Right.
Stop thinking about, if you're talking to anybody else in the podcast industry and they start talking about monetization, just run, because they do not get your business. They do not get the greatest opportunity with podcast, which is the three things that we talked about. Client communication. So retain your existing clients and build deeper, better relationships with those people. Attract new centers of influence and guests that otherwise might not ever pay attention to you, or it might take way longer to get them to pay attention to you. Some of our most successful podcasters that we know have exclusively used their podcasts to bring on people that they want to have a relationship with, who they end up building partnerships with, and they end up sharing clients and absolutely doing amazing work together. And the podcast is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And the next one is use it to build and grow an audience of raving fans who are ideal, who people who get you, who people you would love working with. Start building that. And by the way, if you think you can build this in 6 months or a year or 2 years, you're mistaken. This has got to take. It's one of the things that Gary Vaynerchuk mentioned in his podcast, was that you do not even think about this unless you're a minimum doing this for 2 years, a minimum 2 years. And I would say he's pretty close to bang on with that.
Yeah.
Minimum 2 years. And that just gets you a foundation. There are ways to expedite and accelerate that. That's something that we're always working on, having success with, and going to have more success with down the road. But you definitely need to be thinking about these three different ways to use a podcast to build your business, and stop listening to all the marketing people who can only measure 1 out of 10 things and thinking that that's the thing that's going to drive your marketing success. Because you know what ends up happening? You're jumping on one roller coaster to the next.
That's that Franken marketing. We talked about that in a podcast a long time ago. Jumping from one to another and not having them be integrated.
We get two different analogies to play there, but our audience is so smart that they can probably track those. Maybe. So I started by talking about roller coasters up and down. And you're talking about Frankenstein, what we call Franken marketing, which is you grab a whole bunch of different pieces of marketing, you throw them all together, and you hope that they turn into the synergistic thing, but typically they don't.
Nope.
Ends up looking horrible, being a waste of time. You thought it was going to be a masterpiece, and ended up being a beast. And most people have beast marketing. That's kind of what's going on.
Well, and then finally, to close out today's show, look at monetization differently, look at how things are tracked differently, but also remember that when you are behind the microphone, it's a show and you have to have a good performance. And very few people out there are going to tell you how to be great behind the microphone. Now, Kirk hates it when I come across as being any salesy. So this is going to try to be as non-salesy as I can be. But we've done over 3,500 podcasts for our clients. Okay, and I say that because we have the experience. We know how to help you get better behind the microphone. And if you want living proof of that, Kirk Lowe is living proof of that. Go back and listen to episode number 1 all the way through probably episode number 30. And then now listen to where he's at now, because of the same sort of coaching that our team has provided him is the same sort of coaching that we've provided for all of you. Now, I want you to think about the same thing. My episode 1 versus episode 300 and something, they're totally different because I am trying my best every single solitary time to have the best show I can have by using the techniques that we teach and train you so that you can be killer.
You know, I just had an epiphany. This is probably my 70th episode I've ever done. You're way beyond me. And this is going to be really painful epiphany. I am not 1 ounce funnier than the first episode. Having said that, my growth has been that just being more comfortable, understanding how to prepare better, understand how to play off of speaking with you. I've actually done a couple of interviews, which have been really fun. We've got so many responsibilities at ProudMouth here that I kind of let you run with that stuff. And it is your strength and you're amazing at it. So it's just getting better. And don't worry about being funny. No. You don't have to be somebody you're not. You can just be fine being who you are and really caring about bringing value and talking about important things and also not judging. Like we said, we were talking about this today. We said, why don't we just turn this into a podcast? Because we're so worked up about the idea of how the entire podcast industry appears to be getting it wrong when they talk about monetizing a podcast. I think what it ends up doing is it paints podcasts in general with the wrong brush. Yeah. And we don't want to see that happen. So we're going to speak up and we're going to throw it back at that group. We've been invited to go back there and be more of a contributor. And this is maybe one of the ways that we can do that is change the whole dynamic in 2 different ways. One is change the story about how to leverage a podcast to monetize your business instead of how to monetize a podcast, number 1. And the second one is find somebody who actually can coach you and teach you how to be a more competent podcaster and have a game plan to promote it and a strategy to actually to turn it into something that is meaningful for your business and builds long-term momentum. I think that's our gift and that's our place in the podcast movement is to figure out how to do that. So, hang out with us, tell people about our podcast, please. Epiphany-wise, probably one of the most interesting things about our podcast journey is not editing out mistakes because they're just part of your personality, right?
We want you to be you, right? And that's because, as Oscar Wilde said, and I say this a lot on the show, everybody else is taken. Here's the deal. Subscribe to the podcast if you want more of this, if you have not already. And if you know somebody who really is in the world of podcasting and you need to interrupt their patterns of thought because they're wrong, please make sure that you share this with them. Then also, if you can give us a quick review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the podcast, we greatly appreciate it. So for Kirk Lowe and all of us here at ProudMouth, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon. Thanks for listening to the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast, brought to you by ProudMouth. If you want to learn more about how you can be your own loud, Visit our website, read our blog posts, attend our educational webinars, and sign up for our new Influence Accelerator Academy, where you too can learn how to truly be an influencer in your space. Have a wonderful day.